Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Jeff Fromm, who is the author of 4 books on consumer trends and a partner at Barkley. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm looking forward to participating.
Hey, so for a launching point, I love looking at like an intro and starting off at a unique point, and I see 4 books on consumer trends, and I feel like consumer trends is almost like technology today. You buy the latest and greatest, and 10 seconds later it's outdated. So I feel like that's almost what consumer trends tends to be. I mean, I know there's some things that are common for all people, but with digital and with our attention spans being so sparse these days, I'm certain that you've written books on consumer trends and you find you need to write the next one and the next one because the world and consumers change. So give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then let's dive into consumer trends.
You bet. Well, I guess by chance, I led the first large-scale study of millennials in 2010 and 11, where we looked at millennials as consumers, and Pew hadn't done any work on this topic yet. I did it in a research partnership with Boston Consulting Group. Published that study, and one thing led to another, and I wrote my first book on marketing to millennials, and since then I've had the opportunity to do a lot of research and consulting with brands of all sizes. And my new book, The Purpose Advantage, just came out a few days ago. One of the things I think that's interesting is consumer culture moves at a really rapid rate. And it makes it hard for people to adjust, especially if they're having success, because what they find is what worked before isn't working anymore. And in my new book, The Purpose Advantage, I recognize that a lot of companies know their purpose, their why they exist. But to have a purpose advantage, you really have to move beyond why you exist to having functional, emotional, and societal benefits. And you have to use purpose as a verb metaphorically. And in today's day and age, there's a lot of conversation around sustainability, the environment, equality, and other topics. And we see companies filling the void historically played by public policy experts and organized religion. And a lack of innovation in organized religion and a lack of collaboration on both sides of the aisle has created a void. A void on things that would cause Walmart to send a letter to people on both sides of the aisle saying, do your job. Or for Patagonia to reimagine their purpose as a top-performing purpose brand from do no harm to protect and defend the environment. And so what is going on here is consumers have a lot of choice, and they're discerning, and they're able to trade up and trade down, and they'll spend a little more for brands that align to their values, and they'll trade away to private label when brands don't have a strong value proposition.
Mm-hmm. You know, in your research on purpose, I know that the standard basic business plan, let's write a business plan, you know, what's the vision and mission? How do you compare a vision and mission kind of statement or a vision and mission in general to a purpose? What's the difference, and how should people look at these? Because I feel like purpose kind of transcends those and takes it to the next level.
Yeah, it's a tough question because there are a lot of definitions floating around. So for me, vision and mission are important for your employees to understand. Whether there's a formal, lengthy statement or not, I could almost argue the shorter the better, right? Patagonia might have a long statement, but it's real easy to understand. They've reimagined their view from do no harm to protect and defend. So protect and defend is what their aim is. So when I talk about why companies exist, that leads us back to the conversation on purpose generally. But it's my belief that that will not be enough for many brands to succeed. And the truth of the matter is, brands like Ben & Jerry's are focused on prison reform, and their focus on these kinds of issues creates cultural conversation. Mm-hmm. Nike's focus on equality creates cultural conversation. And in our research, what we found is brands that have a lot of cultural conversation get enormous amounts of word of mouth and word of mouse. And these brands have an edge because people advocate for those brands. So we live in an era where even large brands are starting to come to the table and take positions, right? I don't think 10 years ago we would have ever thought Walmart would send a letter to Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the House, saying basically, do your job. Why are we doing your job for you? And they did that, and they did it very publicly. And so I do think consumers are tired of inaction, and that's inaction from organized religion, which has been a source of purpose, as well as inaction from, honestly, government, people who were hired to work on behalf of people who spend a lot of their time fundraising, which was not what they were hired to do. And so we're seeing more and more brands enter the conversation on a variety of topics. And the topics tend to vary based on their brand's editorial authority. Yeah. And the investor community has taken notice. And what we have found is brands with a soul have an advantage. In fact, Unilever, a public company, said that the brands that they have that are in their sustainable living group have been growing at a rate 69% faster than the brands not in their sustainable living group. Wow. So think about that for a moment. Or do your own research on shelf and see that you can go buy a bottle of Seventh Generation and you pay an extra $1 versus Tide, one of the most well-known brands on the planet. So here's a brand that's far less known, getting an extra $1 per bottle times millions of bottles against a Goliath. And so I think it's time for brand strategy professionals to say, wow, doing good and making profit are not mutually exclusive. They actually, when done right,
we can go down the path of cause marketing and corporate social responsibility. Those are huge, huge things. But I want to put a pin in that for 2 seconds and comment on something that you were saying right here, because it feels like if a brand has a vision and mission, that's about them. Hey, our corporate brand is our vision and mission. But you're describing this higher, broader reaching, not even a 30,000-foot view, but probably a 60,000-foot view of purpose. Like, we want to change the world kind of purpose, which goes way beyond their brand. It kind of pulls people in. You're mentioning Nike and Patagonia. And I think that's a really big, big delineation. And then you mentioned the millennials. And if I'm correct in thinking here, one of the biggest kind of bullet points of millennials is, they don't want to come in and do the minutia. They want to feel like they're a part of a bigger thing, a bigger cause. Do you think there's a correlation between these two? Because it's almost like if that is the case, that millennial generation is seeing things that like the blinders are off. They're seeing things way beyond what the other generations are seeing.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I think what we have is a consumer who's very savvy. They're not disloyal. They're discerning. They're able to process a ton of information from the palm of their hand with a little device that's not a phone. And as a result, they are day trading. They trade to private label and low-price brands when they don't see much value, and then they trade up and spend a little extra when they see a brand that aligns to their values. Now, I want to be clear. It's not purpose alone that wins the day. You have to have purpose in combination with something else. So Ben & Jerry's might have a great purpose, but amazing flavors, nobody's buying the product. And Nike might get a lot of cultural conversation around their purpose, but if they don't make shoes that people want, nobody's going to buy the product. So it's the combination of some factor. In the case of Chobani, it's innovation. They're a very innovative brand. They brought Greek yogurt to a category that was sleepy. They were the little brand in the category, but they have a huge sustainability streak. In the case of Dove, it's around trust. It's a trusted brand, but they changed conversation about how people should feel comfortable in their bodies, and not everyone's going to have a Barbie-shaped figure, nor should they.
And self-image, and I really like that. I was in a class a few months ago in marketing, and we were using that video as a case study for Dove, where they were bringing in, I'm confident you've seen this, where the ladies were brought in and they were asked by a sketch artist, describe yourself. And they were saying, well, I am this and that and the other, and the artist was drawing this. And at the end, they come around and it's like this sad-looking person, but yet the person at the front desk or whatever was saying, hey, you describe this person there. there describing them, or their friends were describing them totally different. And they're like, your self-image is so powerful. And who would have thought that message for a soap, a Dove company? But yeah, to your point is that it's that purpose, it's that bigger vision. But if the product itself is substandard, then none of that matters.
Right. And the other issues that I would bring into the conversation, first of all, if you have a strong purpose, you probably have high levels of employee engagement, low levels of employee turnover, because most companies with a strong purpose attract people who believe in that purpose. So those people tend to, work a little harder. And that doesn't mean they don't ever leave, because if somebody's going to pay them a lot more money, or the person that they want to spend their time with moves to a different city, they're still changing jobs. But they tend to do better in terms of engagement. They tend to do better in terms of longevity. Probably the classic case of this is Mod Pizza. Does America need another pizza chain? Well, yes, it's America. But the truth is Mod is the probably 150th or 500th pizza chain to open shop. It's a young company. It's the fastest growing pizza chain in the fast casual industry with several hundred units. And their purpose is around giving employees second chances. Why is it important to align your purpose to your sort of profit? Because by doing that, they have this culture that's better, and so they have lower turnover in an industry known for high turnover. That gives them a financial advantage. And what have they done? They've opened up their labor pool to people who might have had a brush with the law, but they've screened them properly, or somebody who might have had a gap in employment, but they've screened them properly. And so now they've created a purpose that's very powerful, increased their employee engagement, increased their employees' likelihood to stay with the company, have better guest satisfaction, and financially, the big cost of continually hiring and training people has been reduced. So getting that flywheel right is so important, whether you're running a small company or a big company. And Mod started as one pizza chain in Seattle, one restaurant, not first, second, or third to open their doors, still a relatively not well-known brand, growing like crazy.
Yeah. Hey, let's move into the marketing concept of the 4 Ps: price, place, promotion, and product. Well, you talk about the 5th P, purpose. How does that tie in? And I love when I see these, the old trusted 4 Ps everyone talks about in the textbooks. But talk about the 5th P of purpose. How does that tie in with the 4 Ps?
I think the important thing is, for most companies, looking at your origin story. Why did your company get started? What was its original purpose? Are there some threads you can tie in? In the example of Dove, William Lever started that company. Unilever was started, and it was to allow everyday people who didn't have access to clean themselves at an affordable price, right? And so, when you sort of look at some of the history of the company, and you start to think about it, it's like, wow, well, wouldn't it make sense for Dove to take this kind of an action? The reality is that when purpose is integrated along with another factor, whether that's innovation, whether that's focusing on a topic, whether that's trust, or any number of the factors that could be involved, then the company can perform at a higher level. Our research shows price and distribution on average account for 75% of financial performance. If you compete on low price, it's probably 85%. If you compete on differentiation, it's probably 65%. But on average, you're around 75%. So price and distribution are still super important. But consumers have so many choices, and they make fast decisions. And if you do a great job and have a little bit of a soul, you win with your internal audience, you win with your external audience. And the data is pretty striking. And I referenced the Unilever data already, but there's a fair amount of IRI data as well that says, guess what? These brands are having a price elasticity advantage. They have a frequency of use advantage. Who wouldn't want an extra buck on a $10 product at shelf? That's a significant advantage, right? Yeah. Against your biggest competitor in a category that's not that exciting and sexy. Yeah. A lot of people think, well, I'm not in a sexy category. How sexy is laundry detergent? Really?
Yep. Exactly. Hey, do you feel that purpose in relation to the 4 Ps almost acts like a lever or a amplification? Because to your point earlier, if you don't have a good product to base as a foundational base, then it doesn't matter about purpose. But if you do have a good product and then you combine it with purpose, amplification. If you have a good price, same thing. And maybe purpose then ties back to price to go with the bigger purpose and a great product. You could have a higher price and get away with it because of that elasticity.
Well, discerning consumers trade up and trade down all day long. Yeah. Purpose can and should be an accelerant when done well, because you're going to have more engaged employees, and you're going to have consumers advocating for the brand, right? And consumers advocating for the brand translates into word of mouth and word of mouth. So the way I think about it is, when your purpose stands for something, whether that's the environment, whether that's equality, or any number of other topics, then other people stand with you. And when other people stand with you, that's powerful. Yeah. And I think many of the brand leaders I've interviewed, and I've interviewed people from very low involvement categories to very high involvement categories, consumer and B2B, and I've heard the same common threads. I sat down with the head of American Express Small Business. They represent thousands of small business owners. And in the course of that interview, it became very, very clear. I want my employees to be super engaged, but having that kind of an advantage matters, because if the employees believe in the mission or as I say, the purpose, and some companies use these terms interchangeably, but if the company's taking action using purpose as a verb, then that works, whether that's a local level or a national level. Yeah. The hard part is getting that flywheel right. Mod Pizza got the flywheel right by having second chances and creating a culture that's powerful, and that gave them a big advantage financially in attracting and retaining employees in a category where the hardest job for them is attracting and retaining employees. I mean, Any restaurateur knows that if you can attract and retain talent, you have a huge advantage.
So they attack that, which is a potential weak link, and to turn it into a strong link, which then ties into, I'm sure if we had a HR specialist on the interview with us here today, they could speak to metrics about when employees stay longer, there's a huge savings. When employees leave, there's a huge cost to changing over and finding new. So that's a really interesting point, and I love you.
Imagine your experience delivery and guest satisfaction when employees know your brand better. Right? Yeah. I mean, how frustrating it is to go to a store and employees brand new, and they don't understand the brand or what's going on. It's like, so yes, all of the things you said, and and more.
And you've said this a couple times now, and I love it, using the word purpose as a verb, because it's not some inanimate object noun like, oh, that's our purpose. We got to do something with it. It's like knowledge is power. Knowledge is potential power. Go do something with it. It becomes power when you turn it into action. So purpose is nice, but it becomes powerful when you put it into action. So I'm sure that's one of the main points in your book, The Purpose Advantage. So speak a little bit about the book, and what are a couple takeaways that people will take away from picking up a copy of the book?
Sure. So The Purpose Advantage includes a series of interviews with companies across a range of categories and a do-it-yourself workshop, so the reader can assess where we are in our continuum and what we need to do next in order to create a purpose advantage in our company, whoever's reading that. And then I think when people read it, what I've heard from the first, let's say 100 readers, because the book just came out a few days ago, is it's really easy to understand the concept. I understand what it takes to have a purpose advantage, and the examples are very clear across a range of categories, so I know what I need to go do. And I think it's important for people to have a view of what other brands are doing, because I often hear, well, we can't do that at our business. It's not that interesting. We don't have a sexy business. Well, I've profiled a number of brands that are in not so sexy businesses, and shown how they've managed to do it. So not everyone's going to be in live entertainment or technology, and the book does not focus on businesses that have that sort of natural wave. So I would love to hear from people if they want to get in touch with me. My personal website's jefffromm.com, and The Purpose Advantage is easily found in bookstores and, of course, on Amazon.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to make sure that we have the web link directly in the show notes, but that's Jeff Fromm with 2 M's, so FRMM.com. And thank you so much for coming on. It was a wonderful time learning about the purpose advantage and using purpose as a verb. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.